Seeds of Hope is a podcast created on the Lekwungen territory, represented today by Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. We feature special edition episodes at Shianu territory and shared Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh land. As uninvited guests, we hold with immense gratitude and respect the privilege it is to share and cultivate a climate-conscious community here on what we colonially refer to as Vancouver Island. Hi, I'm your host, Claire Marshall, and welcome to the Seeds of Hope Climate Storytelling Podcast. I'm going around my community to chat with folks who are passionate about all things climate, from advocating for more sustainable environmental practices to enhancing well-being through arts-based activities. In today's episode, we're joined by Nicole Van Zutphen, a photographer and documentary filmmaker, and the communications manager at Raincoast Conservation Foundation. Her work tells visual stories that inspire wonder for BC's wildlife and highlights the urgency of protecting it.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
So well. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us on the Seeds of Hope Climate Storytelling Podcast. You're our last guest on this podcast series.
I'm honored.
That's really wild. That's really crazy. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about who we're chatting with today?
Yeah. Heck yeah. My name's Nicole Van Zutphen. Hi.
Hi.
So happy to be here. I like to say that I am a science communicator, storyteller, photographer, videographer, occasional documentary filmmaker, and then I also work professionally in science communications for a charity here in BC. Yeah.
Awesome. A really cool charity. I think you're wearing something to sponsor.
I am. A little plug here, yes.
A little plug.
Yeah, I work for Raincoast Conservation Foundation, which is a charity, registered charity, and an independent science organization that does on-the-ground peer-reviewed research to protect terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems here in BC.
Really cool. Well, that's really important work. And thank you so much for introducing a little bit about your background. I have kind of first of all, I think it's just really cool to talk to environmental storytellers. That's a word that we use a whole lot, but just going into science communications, there's really in the past, there's never been one kind of direct way to do that. I think now you see masters popping up, science comms masters, and even undergrads, which is so wild because I feel like we've come from a time where we had to carve our space into that field.
A little, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we didn't have people that before, this is how you kind of do that. You go into environmental science and then you sneak into the arts, or it's vice versa, which I think you've done. I've done that, and I think you've done the vice versa of you went into arts and kind of snuck into science. Is that right?
It's interesting the crossover that we all have in each other's spaces and the way that lines can be blurred in that sense, which is fun to get to know new areas for sure.
When you were little, did you have dreams of being a little Steve Irwin or a little wildlife documentarian at all, or did you just know you wanted to do something in the arts?
Such a good question. I wouldn't say that I dreamed of being a little Steve Irwin or David Attenborough. Of course I admired those people, but I definitely was just really obsessed with animals, and I don't think I ever grew out of that obsession, and I kind of thought that I always would. And going into my professional life, I thought that people just would find a calling that also made them some money and worked out. But for me, I was just love animals, and I could just stare at birds and just mammals, anything for hours. And that was just always something that as a kid I was really drawn to. And then my dad is a photographer. He was a high school media teacher, and then in his retirement picked up a camera and started going on photo walks and would take me on photo walks, and we just started talking about things that caught our attention and what frames we liked and what we wanted to capture. And also my dad really leans into the storytelling behind a picture. It's more so, looking at this, what do you feel, what do you see, what's the background of this image rather than just aesthetics. A pretty picture is great too. but my dad loves a story and he's a big storyteller. So I think I got a lot of that from him and it rubbed off on me. And, but I didn't actually really get into photography until after university. So I think I'm a bit of a late bloomer when it comes to this field. But I think in terms of the childhood connection, it was definitely just like the fascination with the natural world that I really never grew out of.
That's really cool. And yeah, I feel like from my background and also very similarly loving wildlife and just being like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to study and like be around. In like a more rural kind of like non-GTA setting, that translated into people being like, well, you should be a veterinarian.
I mean, I did want to be a veterinarian for a long time. I really thought, I had like a phase where I was convinced I was going to be an equine vet, but I didn't like super excel in math and science in school. I took it in French as well, so I'd like to say that was a barrier, but also I just, again, wasn't super interested in it until later in life, so that's why it's kind of wackadoodle that sometimes we have to like decide what we want to do.
Wackadoodle. I still so think young. It's wackadoodle.
It's crazy.
As near 30 that I am supposed to know what I want to do. Like watching the hockey game yesterday, I was like, I want to go back and do that.
I know. We discover new things that we're passionate about all the time, and I just like, I really didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do. Like I went to a different program first, like out of high school, because I was really dead set on the idea that you had to go to university after high school and like you couldn't take time off. And then I ended up spending a bunch of money on that program and then switching programs later because it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I think there's just a lot of merit behind like taking your time with it and really like devoting some personal time to discovering what you actually like.
What did you end up doing your undergrad in?
Yeah. I mean, long story long is that I first went to U of T for architecture, like right out of high school. So I was 17, again, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I honestly went to architecture school because I really loved drawing and painting, and I was always an arts kid. And I was like, maybe architecture, well, maybe I can draw and make some money. Like, that'd be super cool. Ended up going for a year, really didn't like it, left. And then a year later, I went to, it was then called Ryerson University, which is now been rightfully renamed Toronto Metropolitan University. And I went for a program called Creative Industries, which is a interdisciplinary program that I like to say is like a baby between business and arts. Pretty unique, like small program, but you choose 2 art fields to specialize in, and then you also get the TMU like business courses as well. So it trains you basically to be, it's really great if you're interested in like entrepreneurship, or you want to be someone who, can be like a freelancer and also who works, behind the scenes, I guess, in the art spaces. So I specialized in film and then also performance, which is a funny side quest that I went on because I was a theater kid in high school. So I thought I was going to go into like acting, and that was a fun moment that I obviously no longer do. But the film was the right one. I picked one thing that was actually relevant. Okay. So kind of relevant to what I do now.
So you stuck with more of the like film and not necessarily like the performance arts aspect?
Yeah, I did. I really didn't when it came to studying, I worked more in like narrative film, I guess, because again, I was interested in working on like bigger film sets, more like scripted stuff. I had an internship in scripted development work at a production company, but again, I just thought that, I think during university, I thought I would grow out of the wildlife animal obsession, but never really did. And then I realized that like my professional life was going a little too far away from that. And I was like, I have too much love for this and like obsession in my own personal life that I don't think I could have a happy life if my like career isn't somehow tied to this, because we spend so much time in our work, right? And I was like, I might as well like it a lot, especially in film work. You know, you're doing like 12-hour days, 15-hour days, long stints. Like, it's going to be a lot of time. So during my final years, I started doing more like, I guess, documentary photography and wildlife photography. But again, really wasn't super devoted to it until COVID hit, and then picked up more of my camera often, and then was looking for like the next step. And that's when I got that internship abroad and really started like diving more into it.
In school, were you like, was there any focus at all or any class that you took on like photography, videography, and an environmental like lens, or was it just something you had to make up as you go?
There was nothing in school for that. Like, it really wasn't, there weren't courses being offered. Like, it was, and that's no like gripe to the program. Like, it was a great program. I really loved it. And they do a lot to keep it broad so you can specialize in what areas interest you the most. And that's why you see so many people come out of the creative industries program that like specialize in so many different things. Like, I've seen people go into tech. I've seen people go into like the music industry. I've seen people that are now like working in concert venues and like all this. It's so cool to see the different careers that come out of that program. But again, I think the film part of that program was catered more to scripted narrative. There wasn't as many opportunities to specialize in like doc.
Yeah.
And honestly, doc, at least in my experience, is a lot of figuring it out as you go.
Yeah.
But it definitely wasn't like a hands-on like film school experience. It was more theoretical.
Do you think that what you've learned coming into like more internships and like even like careers that are more environmental focused, like was there other opportunities out there that you would have pursued or you would pursue today, like to do more environmental focused work? Do you see that like a field kind of coming into more fruition now?
That's a good question. I mean, I like what I'm doing. Like, I really like my current job. I love it. I feel like I kind of somehow landed like a dream job for me. So happy in that sense, but I would definitely, I sometimes wonder if I would go to film school, like maybe just to like feel a bit more confident when it comes to like handling all the tech and, you know, exactly like any skill.
These things.
Yeah, like all this, you know, like tech stuff, it's a skill that can be learned. It's just like, you know, when you're doing it yourself and teaching yourself, a lot of times you want a place to like direct those questions. It's really accessible, and like I've met people through networking that I can take those questions, but sometimes I'm just like, dang, I just wish I had like a prof or like a gear like gear like shop where I could literally go and be like, yo, like I have this audio question, I know, and be like, what do I do here? Because yeah, sometimes it's easy to be intimidated to ask those questions in like the professional space. So sometimes in a learning space, it can be nice, but you know, we're all still learning, really.
We're all still learning. And I do feel like for environmental like communications people, I feel like we're usually like the infiltrators around a bunch of environmental people. So it can be kind of lonely in that way, if that makes sense. Like to not ask those questions, and you want to look professional.
You want to look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah,
exactly. And especially in environmental comms, we're often wearing so many different hats, right? So there are exactly. I know we each have like our organizations, like little hats
we do.
on.
Oh my gosh, billboards.
I know, right?
Yeah,
but yeah, I think I'm just have so many different hands, and so many different things that sometimes I'm like kind of figuring everything out as I go.
Yeah, I feel like it would be nice, I think, in that perspective, like going back, and I also was like curious about film school, like just knowing what you need versus what you're being influenced to think you need.
Yeah.
I think is a big deal. A really, really big deal. I have a question about that. Like I'd love to ask later just about how people can, especially like young people, like they do care about film or that care about like nature and care about telling stories. Like, well, we can talk about it now. Like how do they get into this field, or how can they spark curiosity whenever there feels like there's so many barriers, like financially, for telling stories?
Yeah.
And the way we think of it.
I think a big like mental barrier even for me starting out was like you feel like in order to compete or even be seen in the space, you need specific gear and you need like audio equipment and you need lighting and you need maybe like actors, locations, like because a lot of the time when you're starting out, your products and what you make isn't matching up to what's in your head in terms of like you have maybe like good taste and like you have these like dreams of what you can create and then the product that you're making isn't matching up, and I still experience that a lot. But ultimately it's just about using what you have at your disposal, if that's like basically everyone's carrying around a mini camera in their pocket most of the time.
So true.
You do have your phone. Phones are super capable these days in terms of what they can capture, and just getting to know what you have really, really well and using it to your advantage. Like I've seen great films shot on like, you know, pocket cameras, camcorders, phones, and just getting to know the process as well. Like being able to really dive into like planning and pre-production and knowing what shots you need. That process is going to help you so much when it comes to storytelling, rather than if you have like a fancy camera. And honestly, like I'm a big advocate for like YouTube videos. I self-taught so much stuff via YouTube and like just things online that are free and playing around with it as well. And I'm still practicing this, but just like trying to be playful and not be afraid of making bad things. You know, everyone starts bad. Like
Invite the cringe.
yeah, literally lean into the cringe and like not only for you, but like share it, like get it in front of people. It can be really hard initially. I just had a film that I did that I like was proud of, but it again isn't going to match like the production level that a lot of my friends in doc have. But I showed it to my friend who's a very talented video editor in Vancouver, and his feedback was so helpful. And he was also just like very kind. You know, he said 3 things that he liked and 3 things that I could work on. And I think if I hadn't showed him it, I won't improve on those 3 things on the next thing that I make. So you kind of do have to get over that fear. And it is scary, right? Like no one loves criticism, but just show people, and like everyone knows where they started, and people are not as critical as you think that they are.
Yeah. I think that feedback loop is a vulnerable thing to seek out. So it's scary. Yeah, because it's like, you know, learning where you can improve can be a hard thing to sit with, because it's like, oh, this is where you're like missing right now, but
it can come across as a failure, but it's so not, especially if it's like acknowledged and you're like, oh, this is something you could improve on next time. That's literally the opposite of a failure.
That's so true. I'm still trying to learn that.
Me too. I know I say it out loud and I'm like, I have to tell myself this later. I'm like looking at an edit and I'm like, this sucks.
No, that's so true. There's like so much of me looking at like an edit or something I'm trying to like tell, and I'm like, this is so terrible. And I think with painting, you mentioned you liked that. Like I think there's so many like parts of all kinds of arts where at first you're just like, terrible, how can I do this? And you have to keep going.
I feel like even with painting sometimes I'm just like, you know, with painting I can feel like art is subjective. And that's the same thing with film, but a lot of the time I can be mean to myself when it comes to film, because I'm like, this doesn't look the way I want.
Yeah, it's easy to be a bully, but to yourself.
Yeah.
But important not to. But you mentioned YouTube videos, okay? And so YouTube is how I know you. That's how I met you. Or I didn't meet you, but I was aware of you because I watched a Toronto Wildlife Center YouTube video. Oh, there was a turtle with eggs that died. The mom died.
Oh.
And there was babies. The mom was hit. The shell was cracked open. You guys saved the eggs and you incubated them.
That was like, that's funny that you say that one, because that was like the first episode that I did that I actually did is like a mini doc and like showed it in a festival. Ontario, which is I'm from Toronto.
Yeah.
And I worked at Toronto Wildlife Center for about 3.5 years as their multimedia coordinator. We got this, as often we do, a mother snapping turtle. Well, they didn't know it was a mother at the time. It was a snapping turtle that had been hit by a car. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, she didn't survive, but they did x-rays and discovered that she had eggs. So we harvested the eggs. We being the veterinarians, not me. I filmed it. Harvested the eggs and then incubated the eggs, and they hatched.
Wow.
Yeah, just because it's so, like, upsetting that, you know, turtles, snapping turtles, they will live for like 20, 30 years and make it, like, survive all that time to try to make it to, you know, when they can actually have eggs, and then a car comes by and, you know, it's like lost, all those years are gone. And obviously turtle eggs are really vulnerable. Like, turtles, I feel so bad always because they start so small and they really just gotta, like, they're just born into like a battleground.
Yes.
So anything that Toronto Wildlife Center can do to kind of give them that little leg up, you know, if it's a mom that's passed away, that they then harvest the eggs and incubate them, it's great. It's really nice to capture that. And then they were released and hopefully provided some, you know, cushion to the population.
Why did that get turned into documentary out of all of the, like, Toronto Wildlife Center work?
Well, that specifically was a short doc that I did that was just to feature, like, how, I guess, in critical population all of Ontario's turtles are. So that was one turtle that was featured in that doc. There was another Blandings turtle in that documentary that had been taken from the wild and kept in a bucket for a month, and that showed the care of that turtle as well. And then there was, I think, another snapping turtle that had come in that had been shot with an arrow. So he came in, they came in with, it was like an arrow that was actually gone through its head and through its hard palate.
Yeah.
But was alive, and the vet team, like, removed this arrow from this turtle's head successfully. So it was just like a look into all the reasons or, like, strange cases that turtles are brought in to TWC, and basically, like, how the vet team and the rehabilitation team work to, like, protect these vulnerable populations. But at TWC, we're making a new, like, video every week for our YouTube channel. And I mean, when it came to patients, like, they were getting in, like, upwards of, like, 10, 20 patients a day. So there were just so many stories that were coming through the door constantly, that we were just trying to capture to show ultimately, like, how busy it was, and, like, in an urban environment, how many things, like, threaten the native species.
What would you find, like, challenging, or what did you find challenging when it came to, like, trying to figure out which of those stories, like, feature or tell? Like, was that a hard process, or did it, because wildlife work's intense, wildlife rescue and rehab? Yeah,
it is intense. I mean, it was challenging just because obviously this is a comms thing. Like, you want to do, when you love animals, every story can seem interesting, but you want to do what stories are going to seem interesting to, like, the general public. So, you know, sometimes if, like, a pigeon came in with string foot, which was a really common thing, which is when, like, you know, hair or string or, like, crap that's on the road gets, like, tied really tightly around a pigeon's foot, it can cut off circulation and then they lose their toesies.
Pigeons without toes.
And yeah.
Oh, no.
So that was a really common thing, but that wasn't necessarily something that we'd cover because it's, I mean, I find that interesting, but, like, a lot of people, unfortunately, don't care about pigeons. So
I do.
I know you do, but you're not the everyday person. Yes. So we would, I guess, like, sometimes focus on, like, the sexy stories, right? Like, we had, like, a fox that came in that was poisoned by, like, rodenticide, and the veterinary team ended up doing a blood transfusion using dog's blood to save the fox, which has, like, never been done before. So anything that's kind of, like,
wild.
Yeah, like, really fascinating, really interesting, a species that like isn't that a lot of people can get behind. It would just depend on the case, but and what we think that would attract the most people, because ultimately, like in a comms marketing perspective, you do have to think about how many people will watch this, because that's going to hopefully garner donations for the organization.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you don't want to think all about money, but that's what happens.
It's the goal.
Yeah. And you do have to kind of lean into like the emotional aspect as well. Sometimes, so it can be a little, I don't know.
There's a cringe element to it.
A little, yeah, for sure.
Not just in the beginner phase or like the beginner sense, but in like we've got to tell a story that people care about sense.
Yeah.
Or it can be.
You really got to like lean into people's emotions sometimes, right? And
which
like,
is beautiful.
Yeah. It can be like, I mean, these are real stories about real animals, right? And sometimes it can feel a little invasive to like put that on the internet.
Yeah.
But hopefully it's because we're, you know, trying to advocate for them and protect them.
What was the transition like between coming from like an internship abroad, where you were like first getting hands-on environmental comms experience in like a working setting, and then going into like, a legit working setting in like I don't know if you were an intern or like what the title was, but communications, like storyteller at TWC, to like your full-time, very professional environmental communications job here now in BC.
I mean, it's funny because there is like a side quest in between those. But I came back from this internship abroad. And then I had a weird stint on Murdoch Mysteries, of all things. Yeah.
What? What is this? Is this culture that I don't know about?
Yeah, I guess it's like part of my lore. I worked on Murdoch Mysteries for a little bit after I got back, working not even in like camera stuff. I was working as like a COVID coordinator.
What?
Because I wanted to get on set and I wanted to like break more. Again, I was like experimenting in the narrative film space, and I wanted to see what like a big set was. And like Murdoch is like a big budget Canadian show that's been going on forever. And it was just an opportunity that I saw literally in like, if you are in the film space, you definitely know about the Facebook groups that's like, I need a fixer, producer,
yes,
something.
I'm in that.
Yeah, exactly.
I know
It's just like that Facebook group where people look for jobs. And I'd come back from working abroad. I was gone abroad for like about a year, and didn't really know career-wise what my next move was, and saw this opportunity for a COVID coordinator that paid really well. And I got that. I saw an opportunity at Toronto Wildlife Centre for a grant writer and applied to that because I wanted to work at Toronto Wildlife Centre. But after I got the job, I found out that the grant writer actually gave my application to the communications manager at Toronto Wildlife Centre and was like, she doesn't sound like a good fit for a grant writer, but like, do you need a comms person? And then they reached out to me and said like, hey, we haven't actually posted this job yet, but we'd love for you to interview for like a comms position instead of the grant writer.
Wow.
So I left the well-paying Murdoch job to go work for Toronto Wildlife Centre because, you know, the animals. And I'd like admired Toronto Wildlife Centre for so long. Like, you know, I lived in Toronto since I was 17 and brought animals to Toronto Wildlife Centre. I tried to do some volunteering there. I just really admired, like, they're one of the biggest, like, rescues, wildlife rehabilitation centers in Canada. And there's really nowhere like them in the sense of like they have a full-time veterinary team, they have a full rescue team. It's really unique, the approach that they take, and just like the scale that they do it at. So I was just very wanting to like get into the urban wildlife space, I guess, and kind of dip my toe into environmental comms and see if I could do something that involved like my camera, but also some science side of stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of environmental people and people that care about conservation have like turned down something that was very well paying. There's a lot of us out there that
we're not in this for the money.
To do something we care about, which is like a different kind of payment.
Loving what you do and being passionate about it, like that's priceless ultimately. And you know, we all grapple with it in the sense of like, you know, in rising cost of living, like how are we gonna make it work out here? And I mean, we live in BC. Toronto's also an expensive city, but I mean, you make ends meet somehow.
You make do.
You make do.
My mom always says, you spend what you make.
Spend what you make. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I've lived pretty rich on minimum wage.
I do. My bad quality is that I feel like I spend a little bit more than I make. Well, that's just the tech girly, like, comms girly lifestyle.
I'm just like, yeah, but that was definitely, I mean, I'm happy I did it. It really started like the whole, like, comms doc world for me.
This is Murdoch, or no, TWC.
TWC, not Murdoch. I love Murdoch. Like, it's a great show to work on. It was like, honestly, one of like the most stable sets that I've been on, which makes sense because it was running forever and it had a great budget and like people got along. People on that team knew each other. But if you don't love narrative film, like the days are insanely long and just so different from the doc world, right?
Wow, that's really cool to have that experience, though. I also didn't know that about you.
Some fun little Nick lore. That's like,
yeah, some lore.
Yeah,
and it's just as important. Those like, I've also had lots of I've had so many side quests. Like I've worked at an apiary, like with bees, and I just feel like so much of that is pointing you in directions. It's just as important to learn what you like, not necessarily what you don't want to do, but what doesn't spark.
Well, I would like get so frustrated sometimes because during COVID, I graduated from TMU at like the start of COVID. And during that time, I deep dove into like online networking to try to find out like how I could get into the spaces that I wanted. And I was really interested in like more photography, filmmaking. And I would try to talk to people and listen to podcasts and read interviews and to find like at least some kind of direction in terms of how I could do what they were doing. And I got so frustrated because it was such a common thread that people would say like, oh, this one random side quest led to this other random thing where I met this person and then like they offered me an opportunity like a year later. And for everyone, it's such like a zigzaggy journey and there's really no handbook on how to get into this line of work. I'm sure there's probably a straighter shoot of how to do it, but I feel like every single person I've met has such a different like journey that's completely different. And for me, when I was getting into it, I found that like just somewhat disheartening because it meant that like I had to figure it out myself. But now people ask me, and again, I'm still like pretty green. I'm like still new to it, but I would say the same thing. So it's just life is full of side quests and like you really do like plant a seed somewhere and then it'll turn up. Like I ended up getting the job at Raincoast because I interviewed one of the scientists like literally during that COVID time where I was like online networking and trying to get involved and had no clue that it would lead to anything. But just like planting that seed, like literally like 5 years earlier got me to know one of the scientists. And then you just never know where little things are going to pop up.
Yeah. So would you say those like random networking calls weren't just something that you had to do would you say they were actually helpful? They
were helpful. Like you never know what's going to lead to something. And a lot of the times, like I said, it can be disheartening. But a lot of the times, like it does fill your cup and like it does just like talking to people, right? Like getting out of your own head and getting more into the spaces and like there's so much value in community. And just, you know, showing your work to other people, seeing other people's work, asking really smart people dumb questions that like, you know, you're kind of at times afraid to ask. Because then people just get to also like know you as a person and then naturally they're just gonna hopefully be more prone to like talking to you like a person and then I feel like more opportunities can come out of that.
Yeah, then you're not just an applicant on a pile of...
Yeah, exactly. Like how are you gonna like stand out or how are you gonna like, you never know what could lead to what like opportunities might be out there. Like there's so many niche things popping out everywhere, especially in like the science communication world now, I think. So yeah, I truly think there's something for everybody to like fit in and find what they're passionate about, and also hopefully like make a living.
Yeah, I love that advice. Or just that sentiment that you can find your way, even if it looks messy at first.
It's always going to look messy.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone like has like a clean cut of how they got to where they are.
Yeah, that brings me into like, ethical environmental storytelling. And how have you like, I mean, there's whole courses on this now, right? Like that you can take on ethical environmental storytelling. And I don't know, at Raincoast, you guys are dealing with a lot of like, is it megafauna? Is that the right word? Like orca, killer whales, and species that we really love, but that are really protected under a lot of like federal and provincial policies. Where, I know that in theory, like you can't fly drones over killer whales, right, or any marine mammals. Yeah. But you guys have special permits to get some really cool photography and videography, right? Yeah, we ultimately just Raincoast likes to do everything by the book in the sense that, we do get very special permits to fly drones over killer whales because, the southern residents are endangered and they have certain, like, distances that are different than other killer whales. We all, like, take, courses on how much distance we have to keep from them at times. And also we just ultimately keep like the respect at the highest level that we can. Like when, just like at TWC, like when we were working with animals, we were like, okay, we have to give them a break. Like they need to, like, you have to be cognizant that like this is a living thing. And it's a stressful thing. Like with Raincoast, when we're doing our research on our research vessel, Achiever, which is like a sailboat, that eventually we have dreams of turning into a fully hybrid like vessel so that it can produce less ocean noise, which is like one of the biggest growing forms of pollution in the ocean. And a big issue for killer whales is like the sound that comes from boats that impedes their like communication with one another. And we don't really know like what impact that's having on their societies. Which is partly why we're doing this research, but it can be really challenging when you're like, oh, boats are the problem, but I'm on a boat right now trying to do the research that will hopefully help mitigate this problem. So we just keep up our distances. We fly the drone at, with our permits. And then when we're sharing the footage, we do always, like we say, like, this is the permit that we have. It's illegal to fly drones. Like we have special usage to do this. So we just try to really be transparent with how we're doing it. And then of course, like you can't like per se, like don't chase the killer whales, and like we have very strong photography ethics behind all of our work as well. Like again, distance, you're not gonna like follow or bait the animals, like just respecting that, like you want to be capturing them in their natural environment, right? Like I feel like a lot of times in doc filmmaking there can be a lot of kind of scary approaches where people have been known to like bait the animals or follow them or put them into certain circumstances where you get a reaction out of them that again is going to be interesting because you don't want to influence them, right? So, and then also like Raincoast, we majorly like we're led by First Nations and we work with First Nations on all of our projects that are led by them. So we just understand that we need to be led by those principles. Yeah. Is that something that when you came into Raincoast, like there were clear boundaries and like guidelines set out that you've kind of learned, or like how do people that are young and that are coming into like environmental storytelling, how do you know what those ethics are and like how to build your like ethical guidelines? Yeah, that's hard. And I feel like a lot of times it can be like sometimes a place where you're like embarrassed to ask questions, and just like there's a lot of free resources online. Like I took like a free
like ethical boating course online that one of the NGOs that Raincoast work with, their Marine Education Research Society made like a free boater course for marine mammals in BC that you can take online that gives you like everything you need to know about like basically boating in BC, whether that be on a kayak or like a motorized vessel, in terms of flags and like licenses and distances and behaviors of animals. And then hopefully I just read a lot, I guess. And then Raincoast also, like, I was privileged enough to come into a position where Raincoast was, like, training me on that because we hold our, like, ethics at very high standards. But when it comes to ethical storytelling, just, like, you know, doing the research and acknowledging whose land you're on and hopefully, yeah, just diving more into that. Like, don't be afraid to do the research.
Yeah, I think some of it is like knowledge and knowing what are the laws like around like drone photography, for example. None of that is like innate knowledge, but even me as like a wildlife photographer, like I kind of know where my boundary is with animals. Yeah. And you know, it is like, it can be tempting because like when you're in that mindset, you do want to get a little bit closer and you're like, oh, I just wish I could get this. And like, you kind of have to like have that voice kick in. That's like, no, think about
let's take a break, you know, like, yeah, it's a slippery slope. But I mean, Raincoast has tons of resources on ethical photography. It's like one of the first things that I read when I started there. So especially when it comes to like our wolf program, we do primarily like minimally invasive research with our wolves that involves mostly camera trapping. So it's also an interesting way to get some cool photos of wildlife in the most natural way that you can, just camera trapping.
Are you involved in that directly, or?
Yeah, I'm like involved in all of Raincoast programs. We have 8 core programs, ranging from like, again, like I said, terrestrial, aquatic ecosystems. But yeah, sometimes involved in the wolf camera trapping, but that is work done mostly like along the like Indian arm. So haven't been out in the field with the wolf team yet, but hopefully that'll come soon. But it's really cool to see what kind of footage and photos they get of coastal wolves and also like gray wolves.
Where has Raincoast taken you, your job here in BC? Like what have you been doing?
What have I been doing?
Other than video editing on a computer, when has been like some of your favorite kind of experiences?
I love with Raincoast as their comms manager, every day does look different. Obviously my favorite part is going to be going in the field. I love going in the field with the scientists because they're doing all this cool, like groundbreaking work. Then they need someone to capture it and like show it off essentially and just like get the message out there, right? And hopefully deliver it in like a digestible way so that all this like really cool, complex stuff is delivered in a way that the general public can understand. So with one of our programs, we have a cetacean program. And with that program, I went out they did a 2-week pilot project in September where ultimately the scientists are syncing overhead drone footage with underwater acoustic hydrophone recordings.
That's so cool.
So that we can see and hear killer whales simultaneously, which there's a lot of research that's been done on how killer whales use like echolocation for like prey, like for catching their prey and hunting. But there isn't a lot of research on basically like how these very social animals use communication and how vital that is to their survival and ability to thrive in a rapidly changing ocean. So ultimately what these scientists are trying to do is see the behaviors and also listen to the whales at the same time so that they can better understand how they're communicating. So then we can look at how certain barriers and like forms of pollution like underwater noise are impacting those modes of communication for them. So what I did was went out on our research vessel Achiever, which is, like I said, the sailboat. Went out for a few days and filmed it, basically, what they were doing. So launching the drone, the hydrophone, how they were locating the killer whales, the process that went on when they, were collecting this, like, intense, like, data. Like, all this, like, just intense, like, hours and hours and hours of data that is going to be used to hopefully create, like, an informed data set that will be able to be a, like, new method of how we understand non-human vocal culture. So made a video, like I'm say a video, like a short doc, like a talking head thing about that, which has been used in a lot of promotional material, a lot of campaigns, because we are trying to raise money for the 2026 field season right now. So yeah, that was an example. And what that looks like really is, like, interviewing the scientists on the boat, gathering B-roll as they're working, collecting, like, audio. And then that's, I guess, like a video example of what I do. But in comms, there's so many different things, right? Like, I'm often doing copywriting, also doing web publishing. Raincoast also has a podcast that I work on. Raincoast Radio plug. Yeah, all of our different seasons focus on, like, a different one of our programs. So the first season was called Of Wolves and Women, which is incredible conversations with women in the wolf space. Second season's called More Than a Fish, which was focused on our salmon program, talking to people about, how, like, cultural ultimately salmon are, and diving more into that. And then the third season we're looking at right now to start, which might focus on our cetacean program and more about this killer whale project. We're also wanting to do, like, a season all about fire, because the connection between fire, forest, and fish is really interesting. And then obviously working for an independent science organization where they are doing a lot of scientific literature. We do have a lot of, like, press releases and press coordinating with the scientists when, journalists or radio hosts, like, reach out and want to talk to our scientists. So a lot of coordinating there.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of moving parts. Yeah.
Yeah. It's exciting though.
It is. And I feel so lucky because, like, I get to learn so much as I'm getting paid, which is really cool. And it's just so multifaceted, and it's really, like, it's always interesting, and I'm always, like, learning something, which is so cool.
That's so beautiful. So you're excited on Sunday night. You're not getting the Sunday scaries.
I get the Sunday scaries all the time. Okay. Yeah, for sure. I totally get the Sunday scaries, but that's just because, like, I hope it's a good thing because it's, like, a sign that I care.
Yeah.
Anytime you care about something, you want to perform well and you want to deliver. So I also just, like, this is another conversation that could just go on forever, but I think sometimes working in comms or being, like, an arts kid, I can feel, like, a little out of my depth in the scientific space, right? But it's important to be able to get to the nitty-gritty of, like, the science that they're doing and be able to, like, mold it into something that the everyday person could understand, because ultimately, how else are you going to get people to, like, care?
Yeah.
And you do need the support of not only, like, the high level, like, academics, but also the people who are just, like, everyday humans who live on this planet as well, right?
Yeah. So much of comms is getting people to care.
To care.
From your team,
which is so hard. Such a big question, right? Because, in this rapidly changing, like, environment, when people are struggling with, like, rent prices and rising grocery prices and, like, how am I gonna get a job? How am I gonna put food on the table? Like, it can be so, like, doom and gloom, and it's hard sometimes to convince people to care about killer whales. So it's just being cognizant of that, I think, and learning different modes of delivery. depending on like the environment.
Yeah, I think, and that brings up just like, I'm wondering if you guys ever kind of confront or like, is climate ever a part of that work? I know you talk about like noise pollution and that being like one of the like the fastest growing pollutants and what's like causing killer whales to have degraded like lifestyles in the water. But like, is Raincoast ever looking at that too? And like with forest fire and
yeah, we do have a forest program that looks a lot at the like rising occurrences of forest fires in BC. We also have like our salmon program. Another, I guess I can speak to it in the lens that I work on it. Like I went out in the field with Austin Shore, who's one of our field biologists and salmon habitat biologists, and he specifically was looking in the Nicole River at how like certain spots in like the levels of the river are going way down, which is making it harder for salmon to, when they come back to spawn and they're traveling, like they're just losing water, which is obviously like needed for their survival. But also he was looking for thermal refuge centers, which is basically like air conditioning for salmon.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I love it. That's how I describe it to people, because that's how I understood it, which is basically just like salmon need spots in the river to just cool off, right? And like that's where they're going to be happiest to grow and thrive and eat and like get reprieve from these like rising water temperatures. So like, yeah, temperature and climate is a big thing, and like we see it in obviously impacting all of our programs and all of the like fields that we work in. So it's interesting to learn about that and again see it changing and see how the research questions change based on that as well.
Yeah, it's something I've tackled like in my own environmental work. Is what I really care about is conservation and wildlife and biodiversity, but in changing climate and so much like climate uncertainty, I've kind of like had that question of, oh, but what if, there's not even going to be like a future for people to really like have like a livable environment and access to clean water and like diversity of like rich foods as we know it today. And so sometimes I like struggle with that. In a perfect world, I just like want to dive into making sure wildlife like feel protected and battle for them and their rights, but also at the same time like an environmental degradation and harm really ties. I think everything is climate related, just like Hank Green's everything is tuberculosis. Like everything has a climate lens.
That's honestly so true. Like I went to, it was actually with your organization, the climate summit that I went to with, that was by Story Money Impact and the Starfish. That was one of the biggest topics we spoke about, is how like right now, literally you can't get a job that's not a climate job, because it's all based, like climate change is just something that is like a constant now. And we were saying that you could frame like the trades and like, insulating a house, like that's a climate job. True. Because based on how well it's done, that's going to have a direct impact to the climate. So green jobs now aren't just like working for NGOs or consultancy and stuff like that. Like literally everything is now going to be a green job, because it's the world we live in.
I don't want to bring this up as like a surprise, but it's something that I think that especially young people in like wanting to go into storytelling backgrounds are really thinking about. And I just am curious if you find like any kind of doubt or what goes on in your mind when you think about like how people are not really fully understanding. This is going to be a surprise, but people aren't fully understanding what's like real and what's not real in digital spaces with art, photographs, video, and ultimately it's because of artificial intelligence, which like is a big word and it means a lot of different things, and we use it very generally or broadly, but more specifically like generative photography and video. Like you yourself as a storyteller, a visual one, like have you had any kind of do you have any like thoughts on how the future will change in storytelling with that?
Oh my God, I'm scared. Like, I'm not scared of the question. I'm just like scared in general of this, because I don't even know how to tell. Like, I see videos now and I'm like,
is it real?
Is it real? Is it not? Like,
I feel like I know when it's real, and I don't know if that's just my audacity, my queer audacity.
The queer audacity is real, but this was talked about recently, because the Killer Whale project that I mentioned, we are working with Earth Species Project, which is an AI corporation, charity, NGO, that uses, but basically the AI that they specialize in is like ultimately machine learning to take like mass amounts of metadata and like hopefully like be able to go through it a lot faster than like a human could.
Absolutely. There's so many good uses.
There is like very constructive and healthy ways to lean into AI, I think. And when I saw what AI could do, and for example, what Earth Species Project is doing with like translating, they work primarily with like animal communication, and they're trying to like communicate and translate what like crows, like these really like smart animals that have their own languages, but, and trying to make that more accessible for people. And for example, the way that the scientists explained it to me, they're taking what would take like 6 months of work and taking it into like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Which is life-changing when work needs to be done quickly, right? Especially for, you know, like it can be time sensitive.
Absolutely.
In when like, you know, everything's going downhill so fast. I'm still navigating this as well, because like in Photoshop and Lightroom, like I use AI, right? Like I'll use AI tools to remove stuff from the backgrounds of my images. In Premiere Pro, there's an AI tool to like enhance audio if you're in the field and like you got like really crappy audio and you didn't have time to lab someone, or like, you know, like you're running gun it, you have a shotgun, something fails. It can be so useful, but also like, it can be so scary and intimidating when you think about the jobs that are being lost, like the talent that's being overlooked. And it can be, of course, like so disheartening for people in this space that are coming and being like, you know, people are using AI to create graphics. That is like my livelihood. But sometimes I think about it in the sense that like, how did people feel when like the internet came to be, right?
Or even electronic cameras.
Yeah, like literally the internet must have been so insanely scary. Like it opens so many doors for danger and
it's like and it can be used for that. And we call it the dark side.
Yeah, the dark side.
The not black market, but the
dark web.
The dark web. And that exists, but most people aren't on it.
But also like there's just, it must have been so intimidating, because just like AI, like I don't understand AI to the depths that I need to make an informed answer about this. But in what little I know about it, I try to think about, how scary the internet must have been, how no one probably understood it, how everyone thought it was going to be completely revolutionary, which I guess it was, but like how people thought it was going to change everything, right? Which it did, but we prevail, we progress.
Exactly.
And you can lean into it in the right ways. Like think about all the ways that the internet has completely shifted workflows, has completely shifted
well-being,
lifestyles.
I met you.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty cool.
Like I work, when I'm not in the field, I work completely from home. Raincoast doesn't have an office. We all work all over BC. We have people who work in like different provinces, we meet with people from different countries, like, and that's possible because of the internet. And I would imagine it might be similar.
Yeah.
We're going to have things that completely shift because of the use of AI, and hopefully we just get better at acknowledging what's going to help us and what's going to hurt us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's going to take some time to be able to develop that, like, ability.
It's a skill set.
Yeah,
We have
exactly. And it's just about, you know, now I feel everyone is rightfully tentative, but there are ways to approach it, I think, in a sense that it could develop in a healthy way. Recently at Raincoast, we were talking about this killer whale project, and it, like, the AI's involvement, I should say, like, more machine learning, because that's so different. And AI, again, is just like everything under the sun is like, there's so much under the umbrella of AI. But we were talking about, like, marketing this project and delivering a campaign regarding this project, and we were wondering, like, how involved the AI component should be, because we're gonna alienate people. Like, some people are so anti-AI, just as I imagine people were anti-internet. And it can be, a lot of people, I think, can think about it in very black and white ways, but at least in communications or in the line of work that we're in, I think our job is to see the gray a lot of the time. I think that can be, like, definitely an overarching message when it comes to environmental communication, just, like, you know, seeing the gray and not thinking black and white.
Was there any other topics that you wanted to kind of touch on, or anything we talked about?
Check out Raincoast Conservation Foundation. A lot of great resources on our website. We do youth education, which starfish might be interested in, wolf program, salmon program, cetacean program, forest program. There's so much stuff happening that I really want more people to know about. And we have Instagram, we have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have a podcast.
Raincoast Radio.
Raincoast Radio, check it out. You might hear me yapping on there and sometime soon. So, yeah. And just love to get more people, honestly, excited about environmental communication. Because, like I said, I never thought that this kind of career would be possible for me. And it just goes to show you that, like, hey, if you like something and you can find, like, a happy medium between, like, what you like to do and, like, what you're good at and what you care about, like, it's gonna work out somehow.
Well, I can't wait to see what you make next.
Thank you. Me
what
too.
You get up to. Yeah, me too. It just like everything is a cascade of just, like, every lesson, every new project. Like, we just learn, we meet new people, and I think we become better storytellers. So just start your next project.
Exactly. Yeah, seriously. Pick up a camera, pick up whatever you like to do, and
your phone?
Yeah, pick up your phone, whatever. Just start practicing and it'll come.
Thank you, Nicole, for being our last guest on the Seeds of Hope Climate Storytelling Podcast. The sun is, like, shining directly into my face, so I hope it's a good way to end.
Yes.
I hope we were recording, as always, and
fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Seeds of Hope, a climate storytelling podcast. This podcast was hosted and produced by me, Claire Marshall, with Britton McCubbin as our director of photography. We'd also like to extend a special thank you to TELUS STORYHIVE for their production support. Finally, shout out to the Starfish Canada, home of Seeds of Hope podcast supporting youth-led climate storytelling and leadership across the country. Learn more at www.thestarfish.ca.
Okay, just quick pause.
Yeah.
I know you had, like, kind of a signature Seeds of Hope question that you normally end them with. Do you want to?
Oh, yeah. I did have, like, a general question that I was asking people earlier in this project when we were recording with previous guests. It was if there was one, like, seed of hope that someone's planted with you, or that, like, you hold on to, like, keep telling stories and, like, keep showing up in environmental spaces when sometimes it can feel, like, hard to do so. Like, what do you come back to?
Oh my God. What seed of hope. That's so nice.
Come back to camp.
Yeah.
This guy.
I was like, I mean, kind of, like, I really do come back, I guess, to, like, the natural world in a sense. Like, in our forest program, our forest coordinator, Priya, she has done a lot of work with, like, better understanding like forest bathing and existing in spaces and really connecting with where you are. And I think I honestly come back to that, and I come back to the animals and observing and listening, and just like the earth is so cool, man. like literally it's so cool that we get to exist here, and just like these natural spaces that I feel so honored to capture and share with people and audiences. And I think that's what I always come back to. And it's like, it's always there, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's very easy to get up like in our heads, whether we're like stuck in an edit or, you know, a writer's block or something, like just the value in going for a walk or getting outside. And like,
You said the word.
Sorry, buddy.
The magic word.
Walk. I said the word walk. I'm so sorry. But like how excited he is about it is how excited like everyone should be about it, you know? Mm-hmm. Just like wherever you are, like learn about where you are and connect to it and connect to the land, because like it is, there's so much mm-hmm. to hear and listen to and way to connect to it. So I think that's probably really like maybe a basic answer, but
basic. That was Mary Oliver. What are you talking about?
Wild Geese.
I was reading Wild Geese by Mary Oliver in my head.
I know. You do not have to be good.
She would love that answer.
Just let the wild, what is it? The wild animal of your body loves what it loves.
Soft body love what it loves.
Yeah, exactly.
Let your soft body love what it loves. That's how.
Basically, we are just like, we really are like simple creatures. So just like, you know, get some sun on your face, get some wind in your hair, mm-hmm. and take a breath. You know, that's what I come back to, or try to.
Should we go get sun on our face?
Yeah.
Let's do it while it's out, because it's barely out these days.
Can I have another piece of your granola lady thing?
It's ready for us. All right. Peace out, cameras.
There it is.
Wow.
Hi.